Hi folks, I'm International Master John Watson and this is Ask the Master on ICC TV. The main idea of this show is to provide you with a forum to ask questions about chess or the chess world, and you can send these questions in advance, which is kind of fun. Gotten a few of those. Which would be by emailing askimwatson@chessclub.com. Let me fiddle with the sound here a little. Or you can send a message to my IC account, which is John L. Watson, L as in lion. The other one is askimwatson@chessclub.com. Email, that's easier, ASKIMWATSON at CHESSCLUB.com. And I appreciate everything I've gotten through the email, and there's some great questions, so don't be shy. You might even want to think about it right after the show before you forget. And I'll consider all questions. I usually get to most of them, so you'll probably get some sort of answer. And all right, so you can ask a question live right now on the chat. You can probably see the chat. There you are already on the right here. And let me put that in view, decent view. And I think I'll just move right into this. Usually I talk about what you can ask about, but all of you know by now, basically chess openings, books, history, pretty much anything about chess we're doing fine with. So let me talk about, okay, now I really appreciate the comments about books. We're trying to get more book discussion going. So I've gotten a little something. You can ask either a question or just give me an opinion. Some people have just written me about an opinion, like last week about the Chess Mind, which was really fun actually. Talking about some of these old books is really funny. So one question was simply, what's the best recent book on the Sicilian Najdorf? And I'm not a Najdorf expert at all, but I have looked around. Two of the most recent books on the Najdorf, which are probably the best, they're by respectable authors and they're from respectable publishers, big publishers. They're Lubomir Fatochnik's Winning with the Sicilian? Let me see. Anyway, it's from Quality Chess on the Najdorf. You can look that up. It's a quality chess book, Lubomir Fatochnik, F-T-A-C-N-I-K. I didn't actually write this down here. And the other one I was going to mention, I also didn't write down, which is Winning with the Najdorf Sicilian by Zavin Andriasyan, A-N-D-R-I-A-S-Y-A-N. The Chess Stars book by Georgiev and Kolev is older, but I've actually looked at that one a little bit, and it just looks great, and I've heard such good things about it from students and other people in the chess world. It's also a complete repertoire. From 1E4, let me just show you that. Maybe I'll show you the Najdorf too, just so you people know what I'm talking about. But basically, this one's a complete repertoire from here. The other books are specifically about the Najdorf. This starts you with an early repertoire, so that's fun. That's Chess Stars, Georgiev and Kolev. Now let me just show you what the Najdorf is, just for those who don't know. It's a normal Sicilian defense. It's called an open Sicilian. And then you play this move. Fischer and Kasparov are the two most famous exponents, but many other players, almost everyone. Gelfand and Svidler are current players. Anand's played it. Probably almost everybody has played it at one point or another. Nakamura certainly has played it a bunch. Probably if we named every top player, they'd have played it at least some of the time. All right, so those are the books that I considered about. And here's another sort of lengthy question and comment related to both chess books and chess history. It's about the ultra-famous game between Morphy and the team of the Duke of Brunswick and Count Isouard. And let me put that up because it gives me an excuse to actually take a quick look at that game. This was supposedly played in the intermission of an opera that was shown in Paris, and almost every one of you have seen it before, but it might be fun to put up anyway, and it'll also put the question in context. I'm going to rephrase and shorten these comments because it was a pretty long one, and basically he quotes from David Lawson's book, Paul Morphy, The Pride and Sorrow of Chess. And then he quotes the coverage of the said occasion in full. Quote, on the 2nd of November, they heard the Barber of Seville. Actually, I think from what I read, there's some controversy about whether that was actually the opera, but anyway. During which Morphy played his most famous game, the Duke consulting with the Count Isouard. Now, it's interesting that in ChessBase, they just give Isouard as the opponent and not Brunswick. So that's strange. Anyway, he says, back to the viewer, a tad anticlimactic that then. Surely the game attracted attention rather soon after it was finished, during the same year at least. You have, of course, read the book. So that's kind of funny, because I'm embarrassed to say that even though it came out a long time ago, and I have 2 copies of it, but I've only lightly browsed through it. I really haven't read the book. But let me change the subject a bit before I get back to his discussion. My interest is mainly in Morphy's play and his style. And if you want to take a quick and original take on Morphy's games and style, I would refer you to Macon Shibut's rather thin volume, Paul Morphy and the Evolution of Chess Theory. And then there's another book about understanding Morphy, his style, and how things have changed, and that's Valerie Bime's Paul Morphy, A Modern Perspective. And those books I did read cover to cover and really enjoyed both of them. Very original takes, not just games collections and not just obvious notes. So, and as far as games collections, I was going to say my first book was Sargent's book called Morphy's Games of Chess, which is one of the few books available in chess, period, much less books about Morphy. So, and there are newer books I noticed about his games by Chris Ward and Frisco del Rosario, neither of which I've read, but I'm sure they're quite good. Okay, so returning to the Lawson book, our questioner says, on a general note, the author seems firmly wedded to the facts, with him meticulously prosecuting the case against Howard Staunton. What kind of jury would have failed to find the accused guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt? I think Winter agrees with that, I think, about Staunton. Staunton, of course, was a Shakespeare scholar, very well known, and claimed that he was writing his Shakespeare books. And, that to me, that always seemed relatively plausible. The accusation is, of course, that he was a coward and didn't want to play Morphy and thought he'd lose. But I'm agnostic about this. I don't know enough about it. And he points out some revelations that are related to Lawson's book. Quote, it indicates that the chess games in the Italian opera, I thought it was Paris, anyway, were not intermission affairs, blitz-like games, were they blitz-like games in the 1850s, as claimed by some secondary sources. Furthermore, it has been recently suggested in some printed matter that the Duke of Braunschweig commanded the black pieces unaided. So this is great stuff. That may obviously suggest additional sources of information, so the question is or would be whether there is any further documentation of interest describing events related to that evening, before which 2 men of noble birth surely had no idea that the leisure activity awaiting them would be narrated throughout the world into the next millennium. So this is stuff for chess historians. I have fun with that. And by the way, I have only one idea. He asks about further documentation. I would think that Edward Winter's column Chess Notes, which has been going on for decades, I bet it's been discussed numerous times, because Winter likes that kind of issue, and he loves the history, and so do his readers. So the problem is finding them, but I think, if I remember, I've done searches before, for example, for Nimzowitsch, successfully. So if you can find the right source, you can search those columns. And I also noticed them listed on, I also noticed that his books, he has 4 books that are mainly collections of those columns, but also some of his extra thoughts. And I saw 4 of them listed on Wikipedia, so you can check out those titles. And they're tremendous reading for chess history buffs. He's probably the great chess historian, actually, in terms of being very specific with facts and dates. All right. So I also got an additional question about the move c4 versus the Tarrasch defense. Let me put. I'm sorry. I was going to look at the Morphy game first. There we go. So here is the Morphy Duke of Brunswick Count Isouard game. His name is Karl Isouard. Okay, so it's a Philidor defense. And this move, Bishop G4, has gone completely out of fashion. It's not a very good move, partly because of this game. It's one of the best known games in chess history. The game was played in 1858, by the way. I talked about, it's funny, someone just asked me about this move. Was it within the last couple of weeks? And I mentioned that white was better, if nothing else. Well, I mean, you can just play knight c3. There's nothing wrong with that. You're a little better because the knight's not very well placed there. And you can also capture. And then capture this way, and he can't take with the knight because that pawn's hanging. And then you can play bishop b5 or even bishop c4, which is with tempo on this pawn, and get your pieces out faster, and the king's exposed along this open file. This position simply favors white regardless. And what else can you do? It's also, I think I mentioned this kind of move not sure if I've mentioned it or not, but basically this kind of structure where you play with bishop d3, and it's very hard to get f5 in effectively. Or c6 doesn't mean much, so white just has space and somewhat better advantage. So we talked about that already. Now again, after bishop g4, white plays this move. And maybe black now should just gambit a pawn. It's been done. Black's tried to do something like that, but it's really pretty hopeless. White has one center pawn against none. Just develop. Or play any of a number of other moves. He's a pawn up really for just about nothing. Even though black has a little development, it's cramped by this pawn. So in the game, and many subsequent games, black captured on that square, and white took back. Now, a funny thing is, Pachman, for example, gives this line. It still says white's a lot better, except that he gives f4 here, which I think it only gives maybe a small advantage. I was looking at this and thinking you should just develop. Play a move like this. Get your bishop out, castle queenside with tempo. This has got to be wonderful. You can play rook g1 to stop him from moving this bishop or creating more weaknesses. Let me see. The reason I'm showing you all this is it's kind of fun. I mean, we're looking at an ancient game, and this isn't what happened, but just to kind of get some ideas about chess and development, which is kind of why they show this game anyway. Okay, now this bishop's tied down to this pawn, so he's probably going to play g6 at some point, maybe immediately, except that that's almost losing, I think, because that's pinned. Now you're going to castle queenside with check probably immediately. And it's just getting very awkward because white can if the king goes this way, of course, white can take and play knight d5 with double attacks. The rook stops bishop g5 check for black. And this move is a blunder. You might see that pretty quickly because of this move and then check. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry about saying here, here, and here, and this move. I got another complaint about that, and I'm feeling kind of guilty about it. I understand people's point now. They want to be able to just listen to the show and hear the moves. I think that's impossible. I even practiced trying to do it. And one reason is I show a lot of circles and arrows, sometimes almost more than moves, to describe ideas and columns and files, and I wouldn't be able to mention moves with that respect. The other thing is it's just difficult to do, to talk about moves explicitly. So this is a visual show, but I apologize for that. I couldn't think of a good solution, and I do understand that some people apparently, since I've gotten more than one person saying this, want to listen to the show while they're doing something else. Someone said at work, which I thought was quite funny, and quite a compliment actually. So I apologize in advance. I did think about how I'd solve that issue. I just don't think it's realistic, at least not for me. Maybe I'm just not fast enough. And also I teach, and when I teach, I've taught for years and years and years, and that's pretty much how I communicate. So I apologize about that, but I thought I'd mention that and at least acknowledge that I understand the issue. All right, so the game. Let's go back to the game. White retakes with the queen and develops and threatens, guess what, checkmate. You guys have almost all seen this game, so I'll go pretty fast. Now white is threatening queen takes b7 and bishop f7 check. Black makes a good move because the idea is he can give up this pawn and play check, and at least he's only a pawn down. He already has a horrible game. There's also a little trick. I mean, it's not really a trick, but it's possible that this is not as good a move as has been given. A lot of people just give this and then take here. The idea being that if you capture here, then you can't save the rook in the corner. But the problem is, I would think you might just risk this kind of thing. And probably white's winning one way or another, but at least there's this really nice counter pressure, and it's only in exchange for white. And, why not, right? Why not give it a whirl? So Morphy played safer and developed a piece, and that's always important. Or he kept developing with that move, which is, in Reddy's book talks about him being the first one that emphasized developing pieces over tactics. It might be a slight exaggeration, but it's certainly true that development came into its own during this time period. Okay, so black defends the pawn. I'll hurry about this. And now black makes a mistake, but that's okay. He's in very bad trouble anyway. And white sacrifices, and I think you've all seen this. Now there's nothing really else to do except put a piece in the way. And white has everything out and attacking. Now he's on this a couple times because that knight is pinned. So black thinks, oh, at least I'm defending that, but white comes up with a very nice move. Rook takes, comes over. Now once again, this knight's pinned, so you're threatening to just take there. Black tries his last little shot, and then there's the famous combination, which is queen b8 check. Really pretty move. Obviously that's forced, and then there. So that's the game. And who knows how good these people were, or even whether sometimes you find out in these old things are kind of mythology, and the game never even happened. Or so, but it's fun. They're always good, and very very nice little game. All right, maybe taking too long on a game you've all seen a million times. Okay, let me. There was an additional question. This is what I was trying to get to about the C4 versus the exchange French. Maybe I should check and see. Which we had, not the exchange French, the Tarrasch French. Excuse me. Here we go. Advice how to do game analysis on our losses. I certainly can. I'll probably save that for next time because it's a complicated question. Italian opera in Paris. There you go. Thank you. Yeah. Very good. I'm a chess historian. What would you recommend against d4, e6? Okay, I'll get back to some of this. Yeah, I agree. I think Morphy, a lot of times the other players would play some crazy combination or attack when it really would have been simpler and better to just develop. So he certainly, but, well, all these generalizations can be a little bit suspect. I have my screen set up wrong for a second, so, well, it'll be, I guess that'll be okay. My chat, I wish I could get rid of some of this so I could read your chats better. Let me show you this first, though. We talked last week about, someone asked about this idea with c4 after knight f6. And we went through long lines with c5 was my main response, and I was very happy for black. On the other hand, white was probably about equal, and it was a definitely playable position. The same person asked about the Guimard variation, which is knight c6 with c4 in this sense, that after that move, e5, knight d7, white might play c4 here. It's an obscure move. It hasn't been played very much. It's been played a few times, and I think it's the same kind of thing. Maybe it's a little better for white just because the Guimard might be a little less good in some ways anyway, since black hasn't gotten the move c5 in. So black can't immediately counterattack the center. But let me just show you this. Let me quote what I say in my book, Dangerous Weapons, the French. I have a book called Dangerous Weapons, the French, which I think still has more Guimard analysis than any other source, probably by quite a lot. Anyway, let me just show you what I said in my book, basically. This is a game between Keith Arkell and Jim Plaskett. So I think usually developing is good in all these positions. Now, Kramnik actually played this as white, amazingly enough. And he played the move a3. This was considered equal, but he played this move to stop bishop b4 check and these simplifications, or even knight b4. And I don't think there's any real advantage here, but at least it's something. I think this move's kind of cool because it hits f5 and it really stops knight d5. And maybe c5 will come later too. I think that's a nice move. And just for example, there's quite a few moves that white can make, but just for example, a position like this, the computer will like it at first for white because white has more space. But I think if you look at it a little bit, black's doing just fine here. There's this knight f5 move, nice knight f5 move that comes in sometimes, and there's no way for white to crack through here. So, and there's queen d7. There's light square pressure. I think this is fine. If it isn't equal, it's very, very close. Anyway, this game, black just developed, which is pretty much what you do against all these irregular lines. And white takes. It's just the same as last time, except that black was able to play c5. White plays that move. I think that's best because otherwise you don't have you're covering these squares better. And the reason that's relevant is because black's best plan is f6, attacking these squares. So if you pin those knights, that's kind of nice. He also gets just developed really fast. But the point is, if you play this whole thing slowly, it's not very impressive. You pretty much have to take that pawn here. You can't lose a center pawn. And if you go there, you're going to lose a center pawn anyway. Bishop takes or queen d6. So you get a position like this, and I'm wondering, I think black's already better. He gets that great activity. White's quite passive. That knight doesn't belong there. The knight's going to have to go to a bad square and move twice. Black's got this nice file. The c file isn't worth very much. I think black's already better, and just my opinion maybe, but it seems to work out that way. So bishop b5 is a much better move. And black's still going to break with f6. Oh well, actually that's interesting. He plays that move. I think it's easier to just get this out, so you can get your bishop out. This bishop's not particularly well placed either, and these doubled pawns are sort of famously don't hurt black much because he owns the light squares afterwards, and because he can play c5 afterwards. So white's going to retreat back to d3. I don't know when. Did I give a line? Knight f1. Oh, rookie one, excuse me. Didn't really give anything. Oh yeah, after this you can play whatever you want to, but I thought this was kind of fun maybe. Discouraging white from taking that obviously, and if he gets attacked again, maybe just something real simple like that. And this seems like a very playable position. I'm sure white's fine, but so is black. Okay, game. Game went there. Now that's an old Guimard idea. This is the Guimard variation, the third move, knight c6. And it's an old idea to play knight back with tempo and then play c5 and then maybe even bring the knight back, but sometimes the knight's actually useful on a7, supporting the b5 square. That's what was played. Again, I think knight b6 was easier. White plays a good move because white has nowhere to put this knight. On this side of the board it's just weak for obvious reasons because of a4 if nothing else. But it can go this way now and aim at the king side. Maybe even play knight e3. And now black plays rook e8. I'm not real convinced of that. In fact, I think I'm going to stop here because we're talking about the opening. Once again, this was suggested by Neil MacDonald, just attack the bishop and play c5. I think the best is, again, let's just get that knight out there. a5 isn't really hurting you, and then let's attack the center. Real simple. No big deal. And if e6, which looks like a slightly dangerous move, then this is with tempo on the rook. And what you do is no matter what he does, you play rook e8 next, and he can't really protect this pawn. So typical stuff. So c4 is fine. It's a good question. There's nothing really wrong with c4, especially against the Guimard. I think it's a little more interesting than it was against knight f6 immediately. Knight f6 and knight d7 immediately, like last week or week before, whenever that was. Okay. Maybe I'll switch to the chat for a while. I've got tons of other stuff to do here. Let me see. Italian opera in Paris. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Why can't I scroll down? I'm having one of these scroll down things. Or maybe there hasn't been any more comments after John's. Okay, what do you recommend, I guess, against d4, knight e6, knight f3, f5? Well, that's a standard Dutch defense. You can always play a normal Dutch defense with this, no problem. Just normal moves. And then you're in a standard Dutch defense. Traditionally, this is the classical Dutch here. Black plays d6, and white can play. Whoa, whose move is it? Oh, white's move. Now, white traditionally has played this move, which is fine, and then knight c3, and then aimed for the move e4, while black is going like this, trying to attack on that side of the board with the move d6. But white a lot of times will kind of not try to commit much and get another piece out. So that's a very popular move. Just playing for more control of the center. And you might play c4 later, but you're just trying to play really solidly. But you can also try to avoid this kind of theory, and let's think about how to do that. Well, one thing is you can play sort of London system. There's nothing wrong with that. And just get your pieces out, this kind of thing, or maybe h3 or something. So that's one setup, and it's sort of common sense. You just get your pieces out. I don't think bishop g5 is worth very much. The other thing is you can play this move and don't play g3. Just get your pieces out that way. And that's actually quite reasonable. It's well known. Black's usually fairly happy with this because he can get knight e4 in, but why shouldn't white also be happy is what it amounts to. He can just develop. Again, you could think about that, but that's pretty ambitious. Most likely you just go there, play queen c2, bishop d3, those kinds of moves. Black might play here. And this is transposing into a well-known Queen's Indian line. Well-known, and I won't remember it. Really well-known. At some point, black's taking here. In fact, he better take first, I think. And then he's playing knight e4, basically. This kind of position. This is fascinating for both sides. It's just a very interesting position. So I'll just leave it at that. White can play things like knight d2 or knight e1, and has played it a lot. I had a game like this as black, actually, by a transposition from another opening, from an English defense. And I played this plan. I played c... well, I put the knight here. Well, let's look at a little more. Don't know if I'll get the timing right. It was something like... I'm probably going to get this wrong, but basically was the queen already down there? Might have been. And c5. And when he kicked me, I played this move, and I was kind of proud of that. Of course, it took me an hour to figure out this whole thing because I'd never played any of it before. And then I played queen here, and I got a little pressure on that square. So it's very much like a Nimzo Indian. That knight on d6 is very, very handy, even though he can attack with bishop f4 or bishop a3. neither of those things works very well. Well, I've gotten way out of the, it is the Dutch. And but this is a way to play against it, to kind of try and avoid mainline Dutches. Okay. Right. Well, that's that. And did we finish this game? I think we did. Did we finish this game? I better watch out. We may not have. I think we did. Oh, it wasn't a whole game. I just wanted to show you the opening. All right. So, are there any more chats, or is it just my screen? Nothing's scrolling down. Someone make a chat so I can see if I'm properly working here. Aha, I am. What do you think about the Dutch in general? Is it okay for black? Well, it's sort of like everything's playable these days. You can do anything. And of course, that's a controversial question, because let me put the next game up, but I will use the board to answer your question. Then I'll kill two birds with one stone, hopefully. Okay, there we go. So the Dutch defense is basically this. Now, one problem is if you play it right away, instead of the way we were just talking about with for example, waiting a move, you allow a lot of other things. We've already talked about on this show several times this move. I still don't really know enough about, but I think it's been interesting for all of us to look at this. We had that crazy line with what was it, D6? I've already forgotten. Knight C3, H6. Yeah, looked at that actually a couple of weeks. We at least glanced at that. That wasn't very good. But anyway, this is a tricky move, and you have to know all this kind of theory. And this is a tricky move, which I recommended in my book, Strategic Chess Opening Repertoire for White, by Gambit. That's a book of mine, and this is hard to play against. You have to know what you're doing. So if you play F5 immediately, and you have to know the Staunton Gambit, which is this move. I've never been a big Staunton Gambit fan, but you probably can equalize this White just because F5 is not a central pawn moving. On the other hand, who wants to just try to equalize this White? So this is fairly harmless, but you should know what you're doing. This is in our Taming the Wild Chess Openings book, by the way. So I'm going to advertise all my own books here. And also Mastering the Chess Openings 4 has a lot of irregular openings. What's the question? Oh, Dutch defense. So maybe it's important to realize that you can play it slowly, maybe even with this move. You can play it in different orders. But if you play a Dutch immediately and White plays a more normal move, that's the most normal move with this idea, then you've got a choice between three lines. This is probably not for the listener who already knows this, but I want to explain that there's different ways to play this. For example, if White plays here. Now black can set up with what's called the Leningrad Dutch, like that. And that's gone out of favor a little bit, but it's kind of surprising because as far as I know, it may be just a move order thing. Because in this, as far as I know, it was doing pretty well when I stopped looking at it. The most famous line is very simply playing, well, first castles. A couple famous lines. One is that this move got very popular, just trying to push pawns directly. The oldest line is this, and it came back again. Nakamura played it, for example, c6, and a couple other people recently. It's sort of come back into fashion. In the old days, this maneuver here seemed too dangerous, and I won a couple games with it, but now I think they've got all that covered. That's just typical chess. They worked out all the specifics. Some sort of knight a6 idea, maybe a5 first, bishop d7, and somehow, and this was all true in my day too, it's the moves they would play, but they play them in exactly the right order, and they know exactly what they're doing. This is the thing about chess. Most everything's playable for black, and it's a practical matter that many openings make black uncomfortable because he has to learn so much and there's so many options. And other ones are pretty simple. That's why e4, e5 is popular, and maybe the Queen's Gambit declined or something like that, or even the Slav. Well, not so much the Slav, but it's just there's some openings are easier to handle. I would say the Dutch is hard to handle, and it very well may be that it's plus equals for White, a small advantage if White plays well. It seems sort of unlikely that it wouldn't be a small advantage for White, but on the other hand, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know. I got way off on that. That's the Leningrad Dutch, but I just wanted to show you what the other options are. This is the classical Dutch. We sort of already talked about that. That's the one where you play d6 and castles and maybe queen e8, h5. It's the most common way to play the classical Dutch. And then there's the Stonewall. And Stonewall got extremely popular when Kramnik played it, and then many people started writing books about it. And the order of the Stonewall is funny. I should have probably. There's all kinds of things. We even talked about it a little bit, but that's basically the Stonewall. Botvinnik used to put his bishop there, but now they put their bishop there and castle. Okay, so that's just a little survey, and I think it is playable. It's okay. It's a little easier to get a small disadvantage in the Dutch than it is in other openings. On the other hand, it has some, I know surprise value sounds like a funny thing because against an experienced d4 player it won't be surprising at all, but against anybody up to maybe 2100 or 2000 or something, it's got a little surprise value. It's not the kind of thing they study. All right, nothing else in the chat, so let me zoom to this game I was going to look at. Oh, I got to send a question along with a game. Someone sent a game, not their own game, and it's the French defense again, but it's with this variation where you bring the knights out first. And of course, black can play there, and I think ultimately that's equal, but it's complicated and fun for both sides. So that's an interesting move that people don't usually play. The main move is this. But black can play this move, and did in this game. And white played this really neat little move. I really like this. It's fun. It's kind of a why not? Why not idea? I'm going to develop it as fast as possible. And I'm going to just, I can move the bishop later. I'm going to get that rook to the e file as fast as I can. And black has to be a little bit careful. The next move he makes, I think, is simply wrong because it's too slow. Notice white's getting his pieces out really quickly, and black's making pawn moves. And also, this bishop is going to want to come back in a lot of positions. For example, if a3, it'd be nice to be able to just bring the bishop back, since a3 is kind of a wasted move anyway. You can afford to move the bishop twice. So I would say a real simple move is just get the knight out. You could also take, by the way, but I think just getting the knight out makes a lot of sense. And did I do any analysis here? Oh, well, e5 is the only conceivable problem with that, because you no longer have time to play e takes d and then castle and get rook e1 check, which is the big idea for white. You can't do that because black castles and there's no check. Then black's probably better. He's got more space, better center, somewhat better pieces. So what white would do then probably is this. If he's trying to get an advantage anyway, that's what he'd do. Black comes back, and we're in sort of a typical French now type position. White's fine. Probably gets rid of that bishop, give himself a little more leeway and make it more of a passive piece. And you get something like this. Rook e1, knight c6. I think I just stopped there. It's just a solid position. I don't think white's any worse, but of course he's white. He shouldn't be any worse. I tend to like black in these positions, even though I can't pretend black's really better. But just kind of easier to play, maybe. Targeting that pawn and maybe breaking it down at some point. Okay, yeah, so I thought I'd show you that. Now let me see, is the game? Yeah, let me show you the game, because that's the fun part. The game is that move, which as I say is a mistake. Now the bishop can't go back to defend the king side. So it has to either take or go the other way. I suppose takes isn't the end of the world, but white has two bishops, right? I think this position is playable for black, but I'd rather be white. Nice open lines for the bishops. It's true black gains a little time, but then it's not like he's ahead in development. And ultimately, boy, the closer you get to an endgame, the nicer those bishops are. So I think white's better, but not a lot better. Yeah, it doesn't really help him to have the king in the center. It doesn't hurt him that much, but it doesn't help him. So black plays more naturally, but again, there's this time issue. And there's that pretty move. I love this. This is the good thing about this game. White tries to develop rapidly for the attack. There's another way to do this, which is kind of similar. It's to go here, castle with the idea of rook e1 check. For example, knight here, rook e1 check. So black blocks off the file, and then here. And really, it's kind of fun. It's maybe only a small advantage if black defends perfectly, but you're only a pawn down, and look at these bishops. Really nice stuff going on there. I think that I think black would be unhappy here. An interesting move is to play this little move here, kind of stranding that guy out there. And I don't remember if I did any serious analysis here, probably not. And then the knight can also occupy the square in front of the center. These bishops are loose. There might be a queen coming out here. There's probably a knight g5, bishop takes h7 pretty soon, especially because white has rook a4 and maybe rook h4. See all the dynamism of white's pieces? They're all active. Now you don't have a pawn break on the king side, so those attacks are never guaranteed, but still, wouldn't be much fun. So it's kind of a fun game. Anyway, he plays the same idea a little earlier. He plays it right now. And let me just make some moves. White's just getting his pieces out quickly. I think knight f6 was better, by the way, than knight e7 here. In this case, in this exact position. And now he makes this horribly slow move. We're not talking about top-level players here. I still think black's Right, black is a pawn up, so he's right in the game after this. White has plenty of compensation, but he should just develop. Anyway, the bishop shouldn't go this way anyway, because if the bishop goes that way, it's not defending the king side. It's not coming to f5 or something. So white properly takes it. The problem is if he takes the pawn, this is starting to get really, really strong. This is really a problem attacking here. You almost have to go here, and then there's this, and the queen can even come out next. All kinds of threats. Not worth it, believe me. But knight takes has its own serious problems, which I think happened in the game. Yeah, white simply took that. Black can't take with the queen because of bishop here. So, sorry about this here thing. My poor listening friends, I apologize. If you're listening, you're doomed. Bishop b7 is an awful move, but he just doesn't understand what's going on. That's away from the kingside defense. Now white just goes over to try and checkmate. Oddly enough, black can defend at least a little after this. White's only a little better. This move wins instantly. Because you're actually pretty much wins instantly because you're threatening queen g4, but you're also threatening to just take this directly. Bishop takes followed by some kind of mate. So really he's out of things to do. That move allows checkmate 1. It's kind of cute. This move is just too many pieces. Look at all the even the rook is coming down. It's a wonderful position. So we're threatening mate. Probably goes here, I guess, only move because because of the rook e7 trick. Let me show you that. If queen here, which is the natural move to defend, then rook here, among other moves probably, but rook there should win because after he takes his checkmate. I haven't even looked at these things really. When it's this overwhelming, I don't bother to analyze much. But so I guess he has to play here. The problem now is the king's on that diagonal, that long diagonal here, and I don't know. Should we need to go further? Let me see if I said anything about this. Oh, I know what the problem is. Excuse me. The bishop's hanging. After which the rook is still threatened. Everything else is threatened too. So this is just absolutely over. Yeah, so it's kind of cool, right? This attack is over. He didn't play that. He played here, slower. And actually it could have been defended against. I think knight d7 is a bad move. He should have just played g6. So now we're back to a completely winning position. Oh, sorry, didn't show you that. It's kind of a cute move. There's different ways to win, but this one's kind of neat. I like it. Just attack the queen, attack the bishop. Takes, boom, sacrifices. And you've all hopefully looked at positions like this before. So he does the Lasker-Bauer sacrifice. And if he goes over here, who knows? Black might start sneaking out with f6. So he does this famous Lasker sacrifice where you sacrifice both bishops. Of course, it doesn't always work. There's nothing like a game where you whip into that, maybe a blitz game, and it doesn't work. But here, it's absolutely overwhelming. Did he resign already? Okay, so the threat is checkmate. There's probably a bunch of other threats too, and he may have just resigned. Yeah, and you can check this out, and you'll see that it's immediately winning. Okay, kind of a cute game. How do you test? We have a test. Any ideas on Chandra So U.S. Championship, especially the word finish? Why don't you be more explicit? Sorry, I just don't remember. There were a heck of a lot of U.S. Championship games. So I just give me a little more. This is great. Probably a terrific question because I love weird positions. You can either email it to me or you can try to put it on the chat. That might be a little difficult. So yeah, I don't have it in front of me. I'd have to look it up. Wouldn't take too long, but I'd have to go off my 2 computers that I have up working on this thing. Hey, that's Eric Schiller, my friend. Just tremendous chess personality who's done everything in the world, not to mention a linguist who did incredible things in linguistics. Any tips for those of us who struggle with time trouble? See, this is a torture question because I'm probably the worst person in the world with time trouble. I think we answered this before 2 or 3 times now, and all I could say is do the thing that top players do. There are 2 things that I think are really worth thinking about. One is, I don't know if it's legal anymore, but write down the times on your score sheet. John, you might be able to tell me whether that's even legal anymore because it's like a note. So write them down and draw lines that move 10, 20, 30, 40 depending on the time control, and draw them so that you have to make a certain amount of moves by that point before the game starts. This is a common tip by a lot of top players, so who knows, maybe it actually works, a lot of coaches. Then the other thing I'd mention is this technique that I'm not very good at but makes so much sense, and top players say this all the time. they simply don't waste a lot of time on moves where 2 or 3 moves are roughly equivalent, or even it is legal. Okay, that's good. Um, it's what was I going to say? Oh yeah, right. What you do is you try not to take time on moves that are not critical. Sure, you might find a slightly more accurate move, but then as we all know, we're going to lose on move 36 through 39, probably 39, right? That's your double question mark move. And so what you're trying to do is find the 3 or 4 places, or with a good player, sometimes it's the 2 or 3, where everything's kind of critical. If you make where it looks like if you make the wrong move, you could lose, or if you make the right move, you could win. There's usually only a few positions like that in a chess game. Now, obviously, a highly tactical, complex game where the attacking moves aren't obvious, well, there goes that theory, but most of the time you're not having those. And especially when I look at my students, they hardly ever have super critical positions. So save your time for those positions. And if you have to make a sort of second best move or a move you're not positive about, as long as it's reasonable, and as long as you do a little checks, as long as you check for your forcing moves and your checks and your before you make the move, make sure you're not getting mated, basically. But and then just go ahead and make that move, because you're going to need the time later. End games are really hard. People don't realize that. And you're going to need time for the end game. A lot of times people go, oh well, it'll get easy then because there won't be as many pieces on, or I need to get it right now because I'll be lost before the end game. But ask any top player and they'll tell you, no, that's not. It's just not the way it works. That's not. If I knew the answer to that, I'd be a much better player, and have had a better career, so to speak. Not that I had a real career, but maybe there's better, but most books don't tell you much either. I have seen that mentioned, but I've especially heard that from top players. I've heard that often, but when I've asked them, actually, grandmasters, and they'll talk about that, just the critical move theory. I think Dvoretsky talks about that. I don't know. Some teachers talk about it in books too. So give that a whirl. And I wish I could do better than that. Okay, I don't see any more chats quite right away. And by the way, I'll look at that Chandra So thing, Erica, and look it up for next week. Send me emails, askiamwatson@chessclub.com, and then I'll really be able to prepare things like that. What do we have here? Okay, this is, which game am I on? I showed you this game. I keep saying I'm going to show games from the readers. And here's one. Oh, I don't think that's the right one. Here's another one from, we're having 2 now from Per Eric. Here we go. Let me show you through this in here. I hope this is of interest. The question is what to do about the Alekhine-Chatard attack. He says, correct me if I'm misinformed here, the Alekhine-Chatard attack, attractive as it looks for white, can be refuted in more than one way and hence is not really objectively a problem, although some degree of toil and precision is required to disarm it. So I should stop there. I write the chess publishing column in the French, and I'm always amazed how no one can. It's hard to find a good answer to the Alekhine-Chatard attack. And look who plays white. I have a lister: Grishchuk, Yu Yangyi, Hu Yifan, Morozevich. If there was any refutation, or even a game that gave black a slight advantage, any line like that, they simply wouldn't be playing it. So I think the Alekhine-Chatard is completely sound. The question is, what should black do against it? And there's so many possible moves. I'm going to split this up over a couple weeks, and I'm going to show you something now and then talk about other approaches. Okay, so we have, let me just show you what the Alekhine-Chatard attack is. That wouldn't hurt, would it? It's in the classical variation. I consider everything with knight f6 sort of classical, but strictly speaking, that is the classical variation, when he plays the move bishop e7. And probably a lot of you have seen this before. And I think we mentioned, for example, the Morozevich line for black, which is so much fun, which is to play this way. And then he pretty much has to take it if he isn't going to lose time. We looked at that, I think, last week or the week before. And maybe I'll show a little more about this because it's fun. And the other move you can make is this, which is what I recommended in Play the French as a secondary system 2 editions ago, or 1 edition ago, Play the French 3. I think I went into some detail about these lines, and they're still doing okay. So if you want an alternative to avoid the Alekhine-Chatard attack, for example, you could play d takes e4, just in case you're playing, you're worried about that. Okay, so the classical is this, and white usually plays e5. Don't think there's much else. I mean, there's plenty of fun, old-fashioned lines, but it's the only one that really creates problems. And this move, and now usually white takes the bishop, and that's where tons of theory starts, is in this position. But here, this is called the Alekhine-Chatard attack, where black gives up a pawn, white gives up a pawn, excuse me, for compensation in terms of opening up the file and also weakening black's dark squares. Once he's rid of that bishop, white's gotten rid of his bad bishop, see those pawns, and black still has his bad bishop, and he's kind of cramped. So it's kind of a neat way of trying to force black to get behind in development. White's also going to gain time in development. So let me show you the basic idea. The basic idea is to play here. And if black takes, now in the question he said he thought, I guess somebody like Daniel King or Palliser, or maybe both of them, said the best way to refute a gambit is to accept it and capture this. And I have a very strong opinion about this, which is I think that, here it is, some book contain analysis suggesting that prompt capture on g5 is the best approach. Daniel King's recent project, Power Play 22, Repertoire for Black. It's hard to argue with this notion that the most principled way to refute a gambit is to accept it. I don't believe that. Not only is it difficult for black, I also think it's one of the few lines where white gets a clear advantage. Now, in the old days, white used to play like this and put a knight here. There's a famous game in Reddy's book, Modern Ideas in Chess, where Bogolyubov wins I think, or Elyakhin, not sure, wins a nice game with this position and just developing and going queenside. And queen g4 is a big move now. But people have found solutions to this. I would say that's reasonable for black, quite reasonable. But this move, which looks so innocent. Now, did I? Oh, I didn't give it. I do have a game with this, but I haven't really. I didn't put it down here. I didn't include it here. Simply threatens that. And next week I'll show you some of this stuff. It's really fun. If you want to play the Alekhine-Chatard as white, it looks like a fairly harmless position because he has g6, which is the main move, or even h6. But I think both of those moves gives white an advantage. White's, of course, intending to castle queenside and just get all his pieces out quickly. Usually knight f3. Usually there's no f4, f5, although you could think about that. And just develop quickly, and you have space, and black has to kind of coordinate. He has to get all these pieces out. And it turns out it's not so easy to do effectively. So that's my opinion, is that this is the worst thing to do, is to take the pawn if white knows what he's doing. And most everybody knows this move now. I would say 5 years ago, Johnny Hector played that move, I think for the first time, or at least the first well-known game. Johnny Hector's a Swedish player who plays a lot of irregular openings. Great fun. If you ever want to have a lot of fun with openings, just look him up in the database and see what you see there. just look at all the crazy stuff he plays. And some of it's actually in regular normal openings like this, but it's just one new idea, and usually very creative. It's a lot of fun. He's a strong player. He's grandmaster. All right, so where are we here? We're at that. Okay, so what can you do? Well, I was going to show you a game with just castling, not because it's necessarily the best move, but just because it looks like the most risky one. It's kind of what white's after, right? Because he's got this, and he has a bishop aiming that way, and maybe a queen coming out either here or here. So I thought I'd show you that first, and then maybe next week I'll show you some other stuff. Just for the record, black can play this move. It's perfectly good. It's played a lot. I have 40 games with this in my chess publishing column. That's how often it's played. That's a lot, because I do 7 or 8 games a month. Of course, I've done it for years, but and also all 40 weren't mine. I apologize. So probably about 20 of them are mine. But the Chess Publishing Archives, great site by the way, chesspublishing.com, has about 40 Alekhine-Chatards, and mostly between high-rated players. So you understand that it must be sound, and also that it's interesting and fun, and still being played all the time. I mean, it's by top players. Hu Yifan played it a bunch of times, well, and it kept winning. I mean, White's winning record is by the good. Well, the good players win anyway, don't they? But they win partly because of this opening. They do well with it. Where was I? Oh yeah, so h6 is a move. c5 looks risky, but is actually a pretty good move, and that's, I think, is I'm hoping that's the Ogor Natirlis suggestion from their book, and several people have played it, and there have been some nice games for white recently. So they don't really cover it perfectly. You have to supplement it with your own analysis and extra games if you're going to play c5. Still, I think it can hang in there if you play really well. That move has always been very logical to me, and it's been played a lot, which is preparing c5. And then some people play for this reorganization right away instead of taking and playing this. The idea is get your pieces out, and probably you'll castle queenside. Because at some point, white's probably going to take this. And you might play for f6 also. But that's a legitimate move. And I'm probably, well, f6 has been played, but that's really dangerous. It's playable, but kind of nuts. So I think those are all the moves. And in this game, black played there. And I'm going to show this move just because it's fun. I also think it's the best move. There's almost a forced draw is silly, but there's a long, long line that's been analyzed for years that goes like this. Black starts counterattacking the center, ignores white's attack. This is an interesting move, but it seems okay for black if you know what you're doing. And then white just white hasn't always made this move, but white plows ahead and gets right next to that king. And guess what? He's threatening h5 pretty soon, but the bishop's hanging right now. So you'd think this would be too risky for black, but actually it's been played quite a lot. Now this move I don't trust exactly, so the best move I think is to capture immediately, yes. And then white should start giving up material, because otherwise the center just falls apart. And then black makes this wonderful move, because the idea is that if, well, I'll show you. Well, first of all, if white takes, you can take this. And then white can start sacrificing. Anyway, it goes on for a long time. Maybe I can show you the very main line. Yeah, let me show you the very main line. Now b3 is extremely interesting here, just a slow move. But that doesn't mean it's better for white at all. So instead of that, white plays, captures. And maybe I won't go much further, but essentially what happens is not surprising. You get some position where all you have is a, I think maybe he takes here first. I have no idea. But the point is it turns out that there's only a perpetual, even though white has many other tries. It's all been kind of worked out. So, I mean, there's an example of some line where black was able to get away with castling, but obviously it's very scary, right? And in this game, plays a move that I think is better, more interesting anyway. And black plays a fascinating move. There's all kinds of things to do now. White's basic idea is just this, and start aiming the pieces to the king side. There's this nice fact that the queen is aiming that way. There might even be a threat of bishop h6 winning the exchange, although I'm not so sure that's such a good idea, but at least it's a pseudo threat. It might be a threat pretty soon. And there's also the idea of lifting the rook, or castling queenside and lifting a rook. So it's kind of fun. Black, on the other hand, can just attack in the center, but this time he chooses to attack in a very odd way. It's probably sound. Now white can play just bishop here to try to get an attack on the king side. In this game he plays here. Sort of obvious, right? Black retreats, and this bishop is attacked. And the idea is that this queen is quite exposed to attack. Knight takes e5, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe knight b6, trapping the queen. I think it traps the queen. By golly, it does. So white has to react to that. And in this case, he takes. Now, you can play queen takes d5, but black gets a lot of compensation, as you can imagine, because black's getting better development and open lines and et cetera, et cetera. Well, black would win a piece in that case, right? But white gets 3 pawns, and he gets the h-file. And then he tries to attack, but black's bishop comes back to defend, and blah, blah, blah. I have no idea who's better there. So in this game, white simply takes and tries to stay a pawn ahead and retreats. There's options on every move. Black plays this, and oddly enough, that's really quite a mistake. Black should not expose himself so much. He should play there, which incidentally threatens that kind of move. But more importantly, you're going to get rid of a potential attacker. And then do I give some analysis of this? Castles. White wants to go as fast as possible. He doesn't care about doubled pawns. He needs to get everything going. And this happened in one game here. No, it's not mate because of rook f8. And don't ask me. It's supposed to be about equal. This was a correspondence game. But just so you know how maybe this should be played. Instead, black played a very natural move, but he's, again, neglecting his development a little bit. So I think that's just basically a bad move, because now we've opened up that file against that weak d-pawn. And it looks logical because, look, he kind of pushes forward now. And usually when black gets some space and counterattack and queen a5 and bishop here, and he's got plenty of compensation for the one little isolated pawn. But in this particular case, it doesn't work out very well. Just attacks the center, and then attacks the bishop and the knight. And this is getting a little bit weak. It's a fun game, though. It's an interesting game. I think you'll enjoy this finish. Just checking the time a little. Okay, and okay, a nice move. He's swinging over to the king side indirectly by attacking this way, attacking the bishop, and then he's thinking about going all the way over here. So that's a fun move, and maybe that's almost a decisive move, or it certainly gives him a big advantage. Yeah, black's still in it, but just barely. So black played here. It turns out there's very little other way to get to protect that bishop effectively. White puts another piece aiming at the king side. Black plays here, and that move really does turn out badly. It makes so much sense, develop a piece, but there are probably better ways to do it. And from now on, I don't know if there's much of a defense. White's simply roaring down here. The threat now is something like knight takes, and then there's going to be a bishop takes f6 after rook e8. You'll see that actually. So black captures. I think he just recaptures. No, he doesn't. Already he plays this move, knight f6, and things are looking really bad. Black tries rook e5. Now why does he try that? He tries that because if captures, this bishop f6 is going to be a killer. There's almost a checkmate going on here, isn't there? Yeah, because he's got this diagonal too. And actually he also has the g-file, so I don't know if he needs it, but the queen also can come over. Sorry, the queen can go, I don't know. Everything's working. I guess queen over would be a kill, wouldn't it? Forget it. Just play this right now. I'm not looking carefully enough, folks, but you get the idea. So instead of that, black plays there. And now, is there any other way to play this? Oh, you could capture first. So this looks a little better because bishop f6 isn't in the air now, I don't think. But the problem is, look at this move. Threatening checkmate and threatening bishop takes f6. And that's really it, isn't it? There's not much to talk about here. So already this game is overwhelming. Kind of fun. And he actually plays this move to avoid all those lines. And white simply takes it, and black tries to get rid of the queen. And white has that nice move. It's a cute little move. It doesn't look that bad for black because he can capture, and if that's taken, then the queen falls, right? But unfortunately now the mate threat again. You still think, well, gee, black and the threat on the queen, you still think, oh, maybe I can sneak out. And then this very nice little idea, no hassle here, I'm just going to break through on the H file, which is made down there in that corner. So it's very hard for, and if you'll notice for a second, the material's equal. So if it isn't made, it's going to be very, very strong. And then black should somehow try and simplify a little, but he doesn't even try really hard because he allows this mating net with rook h8, and I think that's unavoidable, and I think he resigned at this point. Anyway, I think it's kind of a cute game, but the answer in general is yes, the Alekhine-Chatard is playable, and I have some suggestions for black, but none of them are that much better than anything else. So I'll figure out one next week that I will favor, but I'll also show you some other games, and I'll show you a game or two, well, a game, I guess, because we can't waste too much time, with acceptance of the pawn. I think it'll be fun to see how white gets play after that move. Might inspire you to play the Alekhine-Chatard. What else was I going to say? Oh, and then I'll show you a bunch of the standard defenses, like h6. And we just looked at castles, and of course it's much more complicated than it looks like, but you could see how dangerous a move like that is, how hard it is for black. So, so there's h6, as I say, there's c5, there's a6, all kinds of stuff, knight c6, and I'll show you a few of the basic ideas, and I'll try to recommend one of them above the other ones. Just did that sack, it didn't pan out. Sack for white or black, Anthony? Writing times is legal, not much else is. Oh, I saw that before. Has anybody said anything recently? Somebody say something. If nothing else, so I can see if I'm having trouble just seeing the chat. The last thing I see is writing times is legal, not much else is. But hopefully that you're so absorbed with these brilliant games, which are kind of fun, that you just haven't been chatting recently. And it would take me way too long to do the thing I was going to do next, so I think this is a good point to either stop or take a few more questions. Hey, thank you for the something. Yes, okay, so it's not my fault. Is there anything up above that I didn't address? Probably many things. Okay. White, okay. Okay. So Anthony tried the Alekhine-Chatard and it didn't work out. Well, you have to be a good attacking player, and you probably have to memorize a little and think what you really want to do in each position. So that there's a combination of factors there. You really do have to be an attacking player. That's why it's called Alekhine-Chatard. Alekhine was white and did these. He didn't mind giving away a pawn for fun. I was surprised to see, frankly, that this was slightly better for white. I've been looking at this recently, and or actually very hard for black, this position. Because to me this has always been a little bit marginal. Black has no weaknesses, and okay, white's got a file, but and the usual answer is here, and then black tries to develop. And for a long time, black was doing just fine, castling queenside, like that. But it just turns out, that takes a little while, and white gets a lot of pressure down this file. He puts a rook here eventually, chases the queen away, and he can double. And if black plays h5, he can break with g4. So white almost always gets his pawn back. And the interesting thing is, once he gets his pawn back, he still has a positional advantage because of what's going on the king's side with these dark squares. That's essentially the overall view of queen g5. And I could be wrong. Black might be able to equalize, but I'm really pessimistic right now. So we should look at these other moves, is what it amounts to. Rather than torturing yourself, we should look at the other moves here. And given the time, I think this is a really good point to wrap up. I'll promise you that last week. What's the advice for being a slump? Well, another bad question for me, since I'm a slump master. That is to say, getting into slumps. I don't know about getting out of them. But let me take that seriously. Well, strength of character, I guess. I mean, that's what Yervolinsky would say. You just need to tough it out. You have to just say, I'm going to continue to study. I'm going to continue, and when I play, I'm going to take a positive attitude. One thing that I think is kind of important among the players I teach, the players that aren't masters and things like that, is just realizing that your opponents are not very strong. I mean, look at this 2,700 and 2,800 guys making all kinds of mistakes. Some pretty obvious too. They get in time trouble. They make mistakes. You have to assume as you're playing that your opponent's your opponent, who is probably 2,200 or 2,000 or 1,800, depending what your strength is, or even 2,400. But basically, anybody between, I don't know, 1,600 and 2,200 or so, they're going to be making some pretty big mistakes. So you have to be confident that even if you get a bad game, or even if you feel depressed about your position, or you think, oh, this guy's better than I am, and I need to, I don't stand a chance, and I'll offer a draw or whatever. Just remember, chess players are terrible. Humans have not mastered chess at all. It's just an incredibly complicated game, and the people you're playing are going to make the same, and you're going to make mistakes too, undoubtedly. So the ability to recover from mistakes and to be optimistic and just keep looking, especially for your tactical opportunities, because they'll come up, or defending resistance, putting up really good resistance, just fighting. Something I've been terrible at since I've gotten a little older, but it's absolutely essential. Just saying, look, chess is a sport. It's a fight, and these guys will make mistakes, no matter what their rating is. They're gonna do some things wrong, and I have to be alert and see if I can take advantage of that. And I don't have to accept that every move they make is some sort of ingenious move, or I have to be scared of it, or that must be a good move because my opponent made it. So I would say that's the best advice I can give. Thank you, everybody, and I will catch you next Tuesday.